Hello and welcome to the Synthetic Frame podcast. This is the first in our series of podcasts which are going to be talking about the changing face of the entertainment industry. So I'm excited to be here today with Giovanni, who's going to give you his background. He's one of our co-founders at Synthetic Frame. And the reason that we're going to have this talk is because, as we all know, AI is changing the world in every industry. There's no industry immune from this. And the entertainment industry is very much being impacted by many of the new technologies such as AI, blockchain, decentralization. And we have an expert with us today to talk about this. And we want to dig into not only how it's changed to date, but what we think is the actual future changes that are going to come, that are going to upend industries. And we think that the entertainment industry is going to be upended as well. So this is our discussion today. So introduce Giovanni. Giovanni, do you want to introduce yourself? And great that we get this chance to talk today.
Yes, thank you, Steve, to have me here today. And I was born as an entertainment lawyer, actually, in New York, for a large law firm, and that's where I got privy to the entertainment business, because this was one of the biggest U.S. law firms. I was a very young graduate from NYU, and I just fell in love with the business, and I have never left it since. And obviously, I transitioned from the practice of law to heading distribution for Paramount Pictures International Television first, and then CBS Corporation's operations in Europe, and where for more than 20 years I was heading their licensing and distribution infrastructure. And obviously, as years went by, my responsibilities grew to turn into a full-fledged representation of their business interest in the Southern European region. So I had really the luck of probably living the last remnants of the old Hollywood, because when I joined, we were nowhere near where the industry is today, and we were still enjoying the old studio system in its at full capacity. And this gave me really an opportunity to learn a lot about the functioning of these mega corporations. Paramount at the time obviously was already part of the Viacom group, and theatrical decline hadn't already started, even though you were starting to see signs of television gaining more traction in the business. And I remained at Paramount for approximately 7 or 8 years. That I transitioned into CBS Corporation, in particular into CBS Studios, where I enjoyed an amazing career. These companies were smoother operations that they then became when Viacom and CBS all recombined into one company. Unfortunately, a very steep decline started for that corporate structure that made Paramount lose about 80% of its value. And only recently, with the acquisition by Skydance, you are starting to see hints of a resurrection for what was once one of the most important studios.
You talk about, it's quite interesting to listen to you talk, because you reminisce a little bit about the old school and the way that it was. And then we talk about now the changes that have happened. Has it been, was there an event such as like COVID that changed everything? Or has it been a gradual change that's sort of been happening? Is there a defining date in your mind?
Yes, I think you're right. I think it was COVID certainly accelerated the process that was already in motion, and there was a steep decline of the theatrical business for obvious reason, and the reason is television, all of its forms, whether linear television, streaming, the advent of the big streamers that really started to take possession of the viewing space. YouTube was another factor that certainly accelerated the gradual decline of theatrical theatrical attendance, but for sure with COVID, everything sort of exploded. All of the windows between theatrical and television accelerated to a point that you could hardly really see a motion picture in theaters before you could watch it on a streamer. And on top of that, of course, of the fast development of streamers during COVID, in particular of Netflix, you started also to see a gradual advance of the new generations with all of their new preferences, and in particular with the need of these new generations to engage in a different way with content. What we call now the creator economy is a byproduct of a very visceral change that occurred in the viewing habits. What we saw at the same time was, especially due to YouTube, to the expansion of YouTube, of a different kind of viewing, where people really attempted, especially young creators, to establish a more direct contact with their viewers, with their fans, what we call disintermediation, trying to reach their audiences without the need of going through an intermediary. The top intermediator in the business, of course, is the Hollywood studio.
But if the creators, who are the power behind the creation, the making of the film, if they're able through modern distribution methods like YouTube or different channels to get directly to their fans and interact deeper, where does that leave these big studios? I mean, what happens to them?
For the bulk of the history of motion picture and television production, we have been in an industry that was run by gatekeepers. So these large companies, the companies that held the financial power and also the distribution pipeline, basically decided what would be developed and produced and how it would be distributed. They had basically the reins of power insofar as the creation and the exploitation of content was concerned. And I remember very well, one of the big strengths of the studio I was working for, Paramount, was of having an enormous, a global size distribution infrastructure, without whom you would have not been able to exploit any content. At the time, we didn't have YouTube yet, or if we had it in a form that was very, very primitive. The internet was already in existence, but it wasn't as developed and fast as it is today. So if you wanted to go big in the industry, you had to go through this enormous centers of power. There was a gate that was basically almost insurmountable unless obviously you were already an established name, or if you had the appropriate network in the industry.
But is that also because, I remember, back in the 80s, if you wanted to do a feature film, the cost was prohibitive for most individuals. I mean, it was very hard. I mean, there wasn't the technology. You had to go and buy a cinema camera. You'd have to buy film. You'd have to do processing. You'd have to edit. I mean, it was prohibitive. And just like the music industry, in the 80s and 90s, you had to have the full studio behind you and the economics behind you. And I wonder whether, with the advance of technology as well, the cost of production has crashed radically. And I wonder if that is also part of the change that's happening, the access that creators have to be able to make, brilliant content. And we'll talk more about AI and how you think that's going to change it in a minute. But do you believe also that this confluence of technologies, you can make a movie with your iPhone today?
Absolutely. If by technology you refer to AI, the blockchain, the new capabilities of smartphones, absolutely, you are completely right. But at the time, the technology was still necessary, to create, for example, movies that required particularly intensive special effects use. These were all extremely expensive machines and technologies to use. So it was still the studios, the only ones who could afford the resources. financial resources to engage companies like, I don't know, Industrial Light and Magic. Now we are on a completely other side of the spectrum. You can literally shoot movies with an iPhone. Actually, some directors do it almost as a matter of principle. Steve Soderbergh uses it very frequently, very efficiently. Then you have, of course, AI that streamlines the whole development process, but also introduces with generative video technologies and all of the related technologies, including script breakdown and budgeting technologies, streamlines the workflow of production and makes things possible that were unthinkable until just a few years ago.
But do you though think though? I mean, if you look at the music industry, 1 million songs a week go onto Spotify. Most songs don't get more than 10 streams. Huge amounts of content go on YouTube, and there's a whole range from the good to the bad. Personally, do you think that not having the studio as a filter, a quality filter, that can be seen in both ways? One can be that the quality goes down in general, but the other thing can be that it allows anyone to put anything on and let the public decide.
We are certainly transition with the creator economy into a community centered kind of decision-making process, which has its good and bad aspects, of course. Obviously, in the studio days, movies were realized with certain standards, but the reality is that the new generation don't care at all about that. I mean, we are submerged by content. The shorter and the content and the more people seem to engage with it. If you look at the statistics, after just a few seconds of accessing content on any of the available platforms, the threshold of attention immediately begins to wane. And this shows this new generation that are coming in, and there are the actual new audiences that the industry will have to serve with content are not interested anymore on that kind of template. They need product that is shorter, closer to their expectations. And this is the reason why creators want to tell their own stories, to share them with the community, and very often create them after consulting with the community about what is appropriate to produce and then distribute. If you think about a reality like Angel Studios, Angel yes. Studios, a crowdfunding model in its substance, that creates a sort of consulting process with their members to determine, utilizing, of course, also data that is now readily accessible through AI, through YouTube, about what the market is expecting, and basically deciding together what they want to get done. So overturning the gatekeeping model, handing it over to the same audience that will consume the ultimate product. So I find this very fascinating because this is obviously the other side of the spectrum with respect to the studio system, to the studio mentality, but shows where the new generations, in which direction the new generations are pushing us. Also the new pipelines of consumption of content. If you think about the development, for example, of fast free ad support and streaming television, YouTube itself that is transitioning from being just a platform to promote product into the actual new television. If you look at the numbers of YouTube, the TV viewing share in the US of 13.5% as of July 2025. Massive. YouTube and Netflix combined account for 22.5% compared to all US broadcast TV that is only 18%. So you see, this new market is expanding at a speed and with such a conviction that I think that if the studios don't adapt, they literally risk to collapse.
Do you think that then with this change, I watch my kids, and it's vertical, short format, swipe, 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 okay? They rarely ever say to me, come on, let's head to the movie theater. Do you think there's going to be no movie theaters in the future? Or do you think there's going to be a group of people who want that experience? And then there'll be another group who want the small vertical microdrama experience? Do you think it fragments the whole industry, or do you think one just dies and goes away?
No, I think theaters will continue to exist, but they will probably become more an event kind of venue. Think about the Wizard of Oz at the Sphere in Las
Yeah.
Vegas, or Taylor Swift's Eras tour, and probably we will see a different form of theatrical product where immersive technologies, for example, will play an important part, maybe an evolution of the IMAX. It's already happening. I
Yeah,
think that,
there was just the Matrix was just recently released with the Matrix with the full immersive experience, which people liked. I think you're right. It's not going to just be the content anymore. It's going to be the experience. But for content, let's talk a little bit about vertical microdramas because there's a growing trend towards these short attention span microdrama in vertical format. What's your thinking on that?
well, it is obvious that that is a whole industry that is developing on top of the industry itself. If you look at the revenue, that the microdrama economy, so to speak, is generating billions and billions of dollars. I think that that is clearly one direction that content is taking. But I'm not necessarily convinced that vertical will become the established form. I think both horizontal and vertical will be able to coexist, and probably in the near future it will be necessary to produce content simultaneously in both formats. I think that what is striking is that how fast these new formats of entertainment are developing, how people are increasingly attracted by content that is shorter, that they are willing to buy even on a single piece basis. A little bit as it happens on Wattpad, where you go in and read the first chapter, and if you like the first chapter, then you engage and buy the second one. Then maybe you subscribe to read the whole book, and you begin to get some perks if you do. With the audiences are not only required to consume the content, but also to participate in its further development. I think new audiences are not satisfied with just watching. They want to be a part of the creative process, a little bit like it happens in gaming. You want to create your characters, you want to be able to create spin-off out of the content that is being brought to you. I think it's a much more engaged audience. Decentralization is the key word that basically expresses the process whereas the artists work in an environment that allows them to increasingly be in direct contact with their fans, with their audiences. So they create content that is shared with their audiences in advance of its creation, that allows their fans to somehow contribute with suggestions or with other types of interactions in the generation of the core content. There's platforms like, for example, Decentralized Pictures that has been supported and co-founded by members of the Francis Coppola's family, that is already awarding prizes to filmmakers that operate in interacting with the platform subscribers. It's the whole process of tokenization that is generating a completely different toolbox for creators to identify new sources of finance to produce their movies or series.